Hey guys, it's Lauren, and I'm here today. I think we're on day 11 of the Healthy, Happy, and Whole study. So I am so excited today because I was able to dive in and learn some new things, hear the Lord in a new way today. And I'm so excited to share with you all the things that I've been learning. Today we're going to focus in on the section of our text, Proverbs 11, verse 16. A kind-hearted woman gains honor, but ruthless men gain only wealth. And so I really wanted to find some verses and things that support kind-hearted women. And like, what better place to look than the Bible and read about some kind-hearted women? So I want to talk today about Abigail, and she is not like someone that I was super familiar with. So I really have been able to dive in and learn in 1 Samuel chapter 25, the story of David, Nabal, and Abigail. And so, I'm like reading this section in the Bible and trying to understand like the major points and the big happenings. And I want to talk today about how we can be kind-hearted women when our spouse, when our significant other, when people, when wrong things happen. How can we be kind women who gain honor, like the verse in Proverbs says? So I want to take you through the story. I have my notes on my phone, and I'm using my husband's phone to film, so bear with me. So we're going to jump to 1 Samuel chapter 25. This is in the Old Testament. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the story of David, Abigail, and Nabal. And basically, in this text, Nabal was just a foolish man. His name means fool. And he was just a businessman. He was just a straight to it type of businessman. No blessing other people, no like sacrificing to help others, just a straight up businessman, bottom line, nothing, no excuses. And he was known as basically just a fool, like a rude person. And so, when I think about some of us, the Bible calls us to be equally yoked, to be married to someone who is yoked, who's a Christ follower, who follows the Lord. And sometimes we get married and then we follow the Lord and our spouse doesn't join us along on this journey. And so, and even if our spouse is a Christ follower, sometimes we can still be unequally yoked. And so I feel like in this relationship between Nabal and Abigail, they're definitely unequally yoked, because Abigail is known as a wise and kind woman. So let's find out what made Nabal a fool and how Abigail stepped up to be a woman of honor. There's a lot to learn from her, so let's dive into this. So, basically, this in this section, in this chapter of the Bible, King Saul was reigning, and he wanted to kill David because he knew that David would eventually take the throne. And he knew that one day David would want to be king. So what David did is he took his men and they would go live in places like out in the countryside where there weren't a lot of people. And so, they were like, when they were out like in the wilderness and in these hidden areas without a lot of people, robbers would come and steal people's crops and flock. And so while David and his men were out there, at one point they were protecting Nabal's sheep, his pastures, and he did that for Nabal. Him and his men did that. Well, David fell on hard times. They needed food, they needed water, and so David sent a man to talk with Nabal's people and like basically reach out, like, hey, we've basically kind of been helping you out can you share some of your water, some of your crops with us so that we can survive? And Nabal absolutely would not allow that. Nabal was a jerk. He was rude. He didn't, like, David did all these things for him, and yet he didn't want to extend the favor to help him out. And so Nabal's servants knew that was going to be a problem. So they went back to report to David what had happened, that they weren't going to share anything with them to help them survive. And so David said, like, hey, let's draw the swords. We're gonna have to go take care of this ourselves. And one of Nabal's servants went to Abigail because she was known as a wise woman. And I'm gonna find the verse. Well, I'll come back to that. So anyway, she was known as a wise woman. So what she did when Nabal's servant went to her, she felt like she had to make up for her husband because they knew that David's people were going to come. And so Abigail, being the wise and kind woman she was, she orchestrated a plan where she was going to take some things to David to help his people. And so she made a plan to jump in. I like the word used with the quarrel that was happening. And how many times in our lives do we have a quarrel? Do we have things going on in our lives? But she didn't act crazy. Like, she didn't go storming in, screaming at her husband. She was wise, she was discerning, and she made a plan to deliver goods to David. And she basically, because she was married to Nabal, she went to David and said basically, like, here are all the things, like, I'm sorry, my husband's a fool. She was kind, she was generous, she shared the blessings that the Lord had given her, and she just said, like, on my husband's behalf, I want to apologize. And like, David really, really admired that. And so anyways, soon after Nabal died, and actually David ended up marrying Abigail. And so he was impressed with how wise and how kind she was, and that attracted David to her. And later David became the king of Israel. So that's basically summing up the story in a whole. And there are 5 things that I really think that we can learn from Abigail. And so, I want to kind of compare this to what our life looks like. Like, how many times, like, maybe it's not our husband and maybe it is, but like maybe a friend, a child, a spouse, whatever, they stir up problems. Like, what do we do first? Are we patient? And do we try to make the situation right? Are we wise? Are we discerning like Abigail? Are we like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And we blow up and we're this, that, and the other. And we're reactive instead of proactive. Are we reactive instead of taking it to the Lord in prayer? What do we do when there's quarrels? Are we posting it on Facebook when there are issues? Are we calling our friends? And I'm guilty of that. When I have problems in my life, I just want to call my friends and talk about it, which at times is okay, but we can't talk about it and then not do anything. And so I think that's a good example that Abigail gives us, is that she saw a problem and she took action. She didn't go all around with all of this drama. In Proverbs, like going back to that verse 11, a kind-hearted woman gains honor. So think about the women that you're around, and we really have some people in our lives that we can't tolerate, that you can't wait to get away from. And then I feel like we all have people in our lives that we're like, hey, like, I enjoy being around this person. Think about the characteristics and qualities of both of those people. The people that we want to spend our time with, they're kind, they're wise, they're down to earth, they don't blow things up. You don't have to walk on eggshells around them. And that is the type of person that Abigail was. So 5 things that I think that we could learn from Abigail on how to be a kind-hearted woman of honor. Don't let fear hold you back. So Abigail could have been so fearful of David, but she had God's courage and God's strength to confront David. She could have been fearful of her husband, what he may have said or done to her since he was such a fool, but she was courageous because she had the Lord. So no matter how difficult or threatening the situation may be, the Lord's power in us is greater than anything that may happen. So if you feel convicted to address the situation, don't let fear hold you back. Relish and pray for courage and strength, and pray for wisdom to approach the situation calmly, whatever that situation may be. The second thing that I think that we can learn from Abigail, be humble and kind. Seek peace with those around you. Like, not everything has to be a big deal all the time. And the Lord has really transformed my life in this area. I used to be so offended. I used to be so bothered when I didn't get invited to things. I probably wasn't a woman of honor because of the way that I acted. And so a verse that kind of supports this: when Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. This is 1 Samuel 25, verses 23 through 24. She fell at his feet and said, "My Lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say." And she was humble. She bowed before him, even though it wasn't her problem. It was, because it was her spouse that caused this quarrel, and she didn't want this disaster to strike, for David to come with swords and fight for these things, because David really had done nothing wrong. He actually protected Nabal's flock. And so be humble and kind. It doesn't mean that we have to take responsibility always for things that we didn't do, but we don't have to always fight back. Like, well, why did so-and-so do this? Or why did you do that? Or it wasn't us. Like, look at how we, pray, Lord, reveal how I was part of the problem, and be humble about it. Thinking about that, she really had no idea how David would respond. He could have killed her. Who knows? Her husband did something really wrong to him, and so she's just pleading, and so she was probably fearful, and it was probably kind of hard to be humble, but she did it as the Lord called her. The third thing that I think we can learn from her is our words are powerful. So we need to look at the bigger picture. In 1 Samuel 25, 28 through 29, it says, "Please forgive your servant's offense, for the Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my master, because he fights the Lord's battles. Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of the master will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will haul away as from the pocket of a sling." So Abigail knew that her words were powerful, and her words, her words and her actions, but her words were powerful. And she spoke in a way that it all came back to God. And she had heard stories of David. And so I just think it's interesting. She brings up those parts of his life, but then brings it all around back to God. And that's really what it's all about when we speak. We really shouldn't be giving our opinions or how we feel about things, but our words have power. They bring life or they bring death. And honestly, when we're giving our opinion or sharing our thoughts, it should all lead back to the Bible and about the Lord, because that's really what it's all about. And so I think that Abigail used her words as power. The fourth thing that I think that we can learn from Abigail, she was loyal and faithful, and she put others above herself. So in 1 Samuel 25, 30 through 31, she could have stayed home and everyone could have been killed. But she put her life on the line in a way, because she went to defend her house and her husband and to ask for forgiveness, not knowing what David would have done. She was loyal to God. She was loyal to her husband and her household, knowing that the Lord would bless her for those things. And you know, like, her actions were like the opposite of her husband's. Like, she was faithful to him. She was loyal to her house, and like, she spoke with discernment, and she took wise actions, and she took action. And so, like, you know, I think that we need to take action, that we can be faithful to our home, faithful to God, but also wise. Like, if we see something wrong, we can be faithful in that situation, but, you know, like, we also need to correct the situation when it doesn't align with the Lord, because he's blessed us with so much. And Abigail was seeking wisdom and seeking discernment from God so that she could be faithful to her house and protect her family. And the last thing that I think that we can remember, or that we can learn from Abigail, is God will fight for you and that you are never alone. In 1 Samuel 25, 32 through 33, it says, David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment in keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands." So God fought for Abigail, and God still fights for us today. He didn't leave her on her own. He gave her courage. He gave her wisdom. He gave her discernment. He protected her. He protected their house. And when God calls us to something, like confronting someone or standing up for our household or fighting for what we know is right for the Lord, he will never leave us and he will never forsake us. And Abigail had faith that the Lord would see her through, and knew that the Lord wouldn't leave her and the Lord wouldn't abandon her. And, you know, God took care of Abigail. And, you know, after Nabal died, like, David saw what a woman of wisdom, what a woman of grace, what a woman of honor she was, and married her. And so, you know, God saved David from battling, saved that household, and he rescued Abigail and the servants from the evil of Nabal. And so, you know, God was faithful to her through that whole situation, and she had faith that the Lord would see her through. And so, you know, there are just so many things that I feel like we can learn from her, those 5 things specifically. But how do we react when there's conflict or quarrel? Do you post about it? Do you yell about it? Do you feel entitled or feel like you have the right to something? Are you humble, bowing down before God, seeking discernment before you seek attention? Are you calm? Are you passionate, filled with grace? And are you straightforth with just like what the Lord has called you to do? Or are you sinking back and not being courageous, but being courageous, being bold for the right reason, for the cause of Christ, for the sake of the Lord? And today I urge you, jump into 1 Samuel chapter 25 and read the story today. And today, maybe when something upsets you, you just pause and you reflect. You take it to the Lord in prayer before you take it to the public, before you take it to a friend. Because when he brings you, when something comes up in life, we need to be faithful to him and faithful to our family, but corrective at the same time, and humble, not trying to be defensive, but being humble enough, even when it's something you feel like